Welcome to Book Crew. We are on KCCC 9:30 a.m. in Carlsbad, New Mexico on Mondays at noon. And now we're wide on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Pandora, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, YouTube, Rumble, and every podcast directory worldwide. How about that?
I love it.
Book Crew. On Book Crew, we help writers get their book written, edited, published, and promoted. I am writer and marketing Jedi Dirk Hooper, and I'm joined as always by author and editor Beth A. How you doing, Beth?
I'm doing good.
All right,
going crazy.
Right, I hear you. I've got a little bit that I want to talk about, kind of where I'm at, and then I'm going to turn this episode over to Beth because she's got a great presentation. I think you guys are all going to really enjoy it. The first thing I want to say is it's been a little bit since we recorded last, and I had a big thing happen to me, which is getting done with the first draft of my book. So I've written 2 books previously. The first book took me 5 years. The second book took me 5 years, which is unbelievable. This book took me 6 months. And 4 of the 6 months was like some stuff happened to me, which was life-changing. Things that, pretty much shut me down from both a technical angle and from a health angle. And yet I still got this thing done in 6 months, which is, light speed for me. It's a very exciting time to get done with the book. It also suggests to me that, if I don't have like 2 life-changing events happening to me at the same time, I might be able to get the next book out. The first draft of the next book maybe in 2 or 3 months instead of even 6. So, I'm pretty excited about kind of where things are going. I don't want to get too much into the new book. But I will say, I've got it in this little doodad here. I've printed it out. I got a whole process that I'd actually like to talk about sometime where I'm going into the second draft where, I go page by page, put, sticky notes down, and there's a number that I look, but like I said, do that today. But I am very excited about getting another book written. And I will say that even in the past, when it took me forever to draft these things, once I get past that first draft, the publishing the book comes pretty quick for me.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
You tease me all the time about how fast I put books out, but once you get that process down pat, and once you get your own process down pat and your own editing process down pat, it doesn't take long to write them.
That's one of the things that I'm really working on right now is capturing the process, and then making sure that I know kind of what I'm supposed to do each time, and hopefully doing it in a way that the next time I do this, it's all going to be kind of automatic.
Yeah.
I'd very much like to talk about that. I mean, one of our, I won't name her, one of our people in our, writers groups and in many writers groups that we're in was saying, hey, who does plotting and how do you plot and all that sort of stuff? I am constantly reading books on how to do plots or how to, make more interesting characters and that sort of stuff.
Right.
I love talking about this sort of stuff. And so, we soon will be talking about that sort of thing here for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully what I've got today will help kick off some more of those kind of discussions. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to mention, let's see, do I have a link for that on here or not? I do not have a link for that. I want to say that I'm going to, once I get to the second draft of my novel, like the second that I get done with the first chapter in the second draft, I'm going to post it on my Substack,
Nice.
which is
There you go.
kdhooper.substack.com. And it's just a newsletter, and I'm going to publish each chapter on there. And the first chapter could be coming quickly. I just need a day or two where I can sit down and start putting this thing together. Like I said, the hard part is over. That first draft is out of the door.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm going to, the reason why I wrote this in the first place is to kind of give it away. So, anyway, if you want to read that, then go to kdhooper.substack.com and you can read it as I release it. That's it. That's what I got. So let me, before we get into your thing, since you mentioned it, how damn many books have you published since January?
Since January.
Since January. Because I'm a fan. By the way, go to Amazon and find Beth A. Freely and sign up on there, follow her, and you will discover that, like, you know, every 3 or 4 hours, it says, hey, an author that you follow has released another book.
What he's not
I've gotten that notification a few times, let's say.
What he's not telling you is the fact that some of these novels that I've released over the last 2 years have been sitting on a back-end pile just waiting for finalization. Since January, I have released 4 full-length novels and 3 short stories for anthologies. And within those 4 novels includes, and I'm going to announce it here, my new pen name, which is for my no smut, closed door, lighthearted, paranormal, cozy romances. And the new pen name is Caradwyn Campbell. And there is the first of Caradwyn's stuff, The Keeper of Run Hollow. That's me.
That is a cool book design. Who did that?
This was done by RJ Creative. She's a book designer I've used for a couple of years now. And she designed the whole series for me of covers for this series.
That's awesome. I think she did a good job.
Yeah, she did.
I like it.
Fantastic job. But
so you have released that, correct?
Yes, this is out. This has been released through ASB Publishing.
Oh, okay,
so
good.
I have released this through Vic Lee's company, ASB Publishing. So this, and there's actually 2 Caradwyn Campbell pieces out in the world now. One of them is in Stupid Cupid, which is one of the anthology pieces that I did.
Hang on a second, I'll bring you up so people who are watching the video can see it. There you go.
Stupid Cupid. So this is out for a limited time. So jump on it now if you.
Oh, really? It's not going to be out until the end of time?
No, not until the end of time.
Okay.
So, but and I have a couple of copies of this. But the story that I did for Caradwyn in here, I have a warped sense of humor. It's called Cupid Has Terrible Aim, and it's told from the point of view of the Cupid, who is matchmaking in the town of Loving, New Mexico. So nod to my next New Mexico friends. So there's 2 of some of the things that I put out so far this year. Here's another one, which is the first, my first book in the Chasing the Rodeo series.
Oh, yeah. This was recent.
Yep, the ASB Publishing is doing. So this is book 1 of the McRae Sisters trilogy, Saddles and Soleils. So that's a Beth book.
Cool.
So yeah. So that's where I'm at the moment.
She's been busy, folks.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
you know, I kid you about it, but I also very much admire you about the fact that you are producing, you know, novels and short stories and novellas and other projects constantly. I mean, you are constantly coming out with stuff, and I want to get to that point too, hopefully. I would like to drop a lot of other stuff off my plate so that I could do that more often.
I'm getting set to start on the second book of the Prophecies of Fate series, Beyond the Steps of Stone. So the second book's called Within the Company
cool.
Earth. So I have it outlined. I'm getting set to start writing that one.
That's exciting.
I also have Heart of a Samurai outlined, which
very cool.
The second book that goes with Love of a Samurai. So yeah.
Oh, I've got a question about Love of a Samurai, but I'm going to save it for when we talk about my book, because I have a question about that.
Okay.
I had something else to say, but we probably ought to get onto your presentation. So let's just do that.
Okay.
I'm going to hand it over to you, Beth. You do your thing.
Well, since I brought up the samurais, I did a presentation called Balancing Research and Imagination in Historical Fiction, Keeping Emotional Truth at the Forefront. You know, as authors, we, especially those of us that like to write historical fiction, or any sort of fiction where we are researching, like you said earlier to me, you went down the rabbit hole researching angels. So anytime we start doing research, or whether it's for historical fiction or any other type of fiction, we want to keep in mind certain things, and we want to make sure we're balancing our research and imagination, especially in historical fiction. And this is something that I've been trying to teach other authors now, how to get this balance without completely losing yourself in the rabbit hole. Kind of like, when I wrote Love of a Samurai, when I started that book, I spent weeks researching Edo period Japan. I'm actually still researching Edo period Japan for other books that I'm working on. And I read about samurai code, Bushido, how the villages were set up, what the clothing was like, what it was made of. There is a difference between a kasode and a kimono. And I'm still not sure I got that right. Even how the lanterns were hung outside of homes and temples and everything at night. In this day and age where everything, needs to be PC, politically correct, you don't want to get accused of cultural appropriation. So you want to make sure everything that you write for historical fiction is historically accurate. I don't care if you were writing a samurai book or if you're writing a pirate novel. You want to make sure that your research is accurate. The thing is that when I was writing Love of a Samurai, the moment the story truly came alive wasn't when I was doing the research. It was actually when I started writing a quiet scene between Mariko and Helena, where Mariko is helping her into a kimono and a hakama for her first training session with Ujiyo, the main male character of the book. There's nothing historically monumental about that moment. There's no battle, no political intrigue, nothing. But it was at that moment when the research that I had done and the time period I was writing in stopped feeling like history. It started feeling like characters and real people. And that was when I realized something very important about writing historical fiction. Research that we do for historical fiction builds the worlds we are playing in. But it's the emotion that we put into the story that makes the reader care about it. So, through all of this, I learned that historical fiction lets your readers experience the past emotionally as well as intellectually. That is the magic of historical fiction. It is one of the most immersive genres that we as authors can write, because we are stepping into another time, and if it's written properly, we are allowing our readers to experience it almost as if they were there firsthand.
Beth, let me interject something here. As a reader, someone who enjoys reading, one of the things that I like about reading, really anything, is, like also not just following the characters and keeping up with the plot and stuff, but also hopefully learning something while I'm reading. And historical fiction in particular, if you find an author who does their research well, you're going to learn all kinds of things about, the way they did things and the way the culture was. And that is a big bonus for me for reading something, is that, you're going to pick up information that otherwise you probably wouldn't know.
Exactly. And that's where the research comes into play. But in order to make the story appealing to the reader, that you also need to learn how to combine that research and imagination and the emotions behind all of it to make it an unforgettable story. And that's also half the fun of doing the research, is learning something new.
Sure.
So, we know what happened in history. The historical fiction, again, makes us understand what it was like to live through that. And, emotional truth is something else that I talk about when I talk about the research, because we want to know what our characters are feeling. In Japan, the outward expression of emotion is not, as prevalent as it is in other countries or even here in the United States. PDAs, it's not, but in order to, you have to do the research to understand, what your characters in Edo period Japan or even medieval Europe, what they felt, what their fears were, what their hopes were, what their ambitions were, what their relationships were like. And then when you combine that with the setting itself, and then the things around the setting, like, training with a katana or learning a fan kata or learning a tea ceremony and adding the emotion to it, that immersion is what makes historical fiction so powerful, especially for both readers and writers. If you love doing research, you should be writing historical fiction.
Sure, yeah.
Emotional truth, as I mentioned before, this is something that makes the past relatable. You've got your love, your fear, your hope, your grief, your ambition, what drives your characters. This is the authenticity of your character's emotion. And when you combine that with information about the historical era, it makes it easier to relate to your characters. One thing that I have seen over and over again in the reviews for Love of a Samurai is the emotions that I have put into the characters, how I have made these characters real. And people have said the amount of information I've put in there, the research that I did on Edo period Japan actually has made them feel like they have stepped into Edo period Japan while they're reading the book. So that emotional truth, if you let your characters respond to things that are going on around them as authentically as possible, then that bridges your centuries. And that's what makes those historical figures feel like real people and not, distant artifacts. And that's what helps, really bring the story to life. From there, we know what the emotional truth is, okay? So in historical fiction, the next thing you need to, the big thing here is the research. I stressed that already in the last, 10 minutes. And you want to know everything you possibly can about the culture, the daily life, the language, social rules. I mean, I was researching kanji, to understand how they wrote things. One of the things that I made it a point of doing with Love of a Samurai is in Japan, it's common for the last name to come first and then the given name. So instead of it being Ujio Takahashi, I wrote it the proper way, Takahashi Ujio. This kind of research is the foundation of historical fiction. And if you stay true to your research, your story will feel accurate and it won't feel disconnected from reality. It's more than just memorizing and researching events and dates. Again, understanding how they lived, what they ate, what frightened them, just even the smallest details of daily life creates the most authentic world, regardless of what, period of time you're writing in. When I was working on Legend of Captain St. Pierre, a pirate novel with my best friend Marion, we were researching things like, what did pirates actually wear? Most crewmen wore a soft shoe called a boat shoe, which we know what boat shoes are today, but a very slimmed down, not so fancy version, or they went barefoot on the deck of a ship. We watch the movies, they're always in, they're in boots that come up to their knees, big hat, all 9 yards. Yeah. And that's actually not true pirate garb. That's probably what they wore when they were off the ship. But when they were actually at sea, most of those sailors, most of the time, they were probably barefoot because it was easier to move around the deck that way. They didn't have to worry about their shoes getting wet whenever water sloshed on the deck. So these are the kinds of little details that bring a historical fiction to life. Of course, we don't want to get, buried too deep in the details. It happens. So when you start with a historical fiction, you want to go with the big picture and then come down small. So Edo period Japan, we're going to look into Edo. Edo is modern day Tokyo. So we're going to look at what was Edo like then. And then we'll come down to what was the tea ceremony? What are the steps of the tea ceremony? What are the steps of putting on a samurai's armor? You need to understand what the political climate was and what type of culture shifts were happening at the time, what kind of major events were going on. Once you start there, that's your big picture. Once you have that framework, you can dig deeper into the details, like, what did the clothing feel like? What did the city smell like? What kind of superstitions do people believe? Those little things help take that research that you've just done and turn it into atmosphere.
Can I interject something again?
I would hope so, yes.
the book that I wrote was actually a period piece too. It was set in the Old West and, in the 1883 in America. And I was writing and got to what was going to be a sex scene. And so to write the sex scene, we had to have a removal of some clothes. And right. I realized I'm right in the middle of writing, and I realized, hey, I can't assume that they are wearing what we wear now. And right, certainly not, I mean, the guy might be kind of close, but I know that women wear crazy things, right. Back in the Old West. So right in the middle, I guess I want to make 2 points. Right in the middle of doing this thing, I had to stop. And I went and did some research while I'm writing, which is a disaster. You should not do that. Not at all. That is a huge mistake. You should do this research beforehand. Ideally, I should have identified, hey, I'm going to need to know, what constitutes an outfit for a woman in 1883.
Right.
And
right.
I discovered there was a like a Reddit board for Little House on the Prairie. Okay. And one of the people that was on this had created a video. She does historical reenactments. Mm-hmm. And she did a video where she explained from the beginning to the end what women did to put their outfit together. And by the way, it's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just put on some underwear and some pants, it is very different back in the 1800s, particularly if you're a woman. It's very I know that in some shows they have people that have like attendants that will come and help them,
Oh yeah,
get dressed and stuff. But I mean, it would take you an hour to get, at the least just to get dressed. It was pretty absurd. But so I guess my point is, number one, when you're plotting out your book or you're looking at things to study for research, identify those things in your book before you get to them, because the last thing you want to be doing while you're writing the thing is looking that sort of stuff up, because it brings everything to a grinding halt. And in addition to that, there is probably some information, and maybe some great information out there somewhere, either on the internet or maybe at your local library and stuff. It's amazing what's available if you just know kind of how to look for it and what to look for.
Yep. So you avoided, while writing your book, you avoided what's called presentism, which is a trap historical fiction writers can fall into. Presentism is what happens when we interject our modern values, our modern thinking, our modern language, our modern dress onto our historical characters. And yeah, it's really tempting to do it. But if you want to be accurate with your historical fiction, you need to do the research and make sure you understand the social frameworks they're living in, understand what the world view allows, and just create your characters authentically. So going through that deep dive on the clothing just for a sex scene, you avoided presentism. So I'm glad you did that. When, again, writing samurai. And don't get me wrong, I did a lot of research on pirates when Miriam and I wrote Legend of Captain St. Pierre, but the extent of research I did on samurai was like 10 times worse. I was in the middle of writing a scene where Ujio was putting on his samurai armor, and most people think top down. And I got to thinking, is that right? Is that really how a samurai put his armor on? So I went back and started digging some more, and I was wrong. They put their armor on from the legs up. And after I went back and read it and thought about it, it makes more sense, because if you look at a photo of a samurai in full armor, you can see where it actually kind of layers.
It's laying over, yeah.
Yeah,
one thing's laying over the other.
Yeah, it layers upwards.
It does make sense.
So it's that kind of thing, that kind of presentism as authors, especially historical fiction authors, we have to be aware of. We need to make sure we always do the research. If you have a question on clothing the time period, go dig. And when I say go dig, I don't mean go use Wikipedia. Wikipedia could be a start, but don't rely on it. We all know the horror stories on Wikipedia. All the way at the bottom of a Wikipedia entry is usually citations of where the person who wrote the Wikipedia page got their information. Go look at the citation pages. Go look for those pages.
Same for AI too, by the way.
Yeah, same for AI.
Especially for AI.
Yeah, if you use AI for any sort of research, double check everything. Everything. So moving from presentism, now that we are aware that this is a thing, that presentism is a thing, and that we need to research every little aspect, we need to remember that we still have an imagination. This is still a piece of fiction. Unless you're suddenly writing a book about Musashi and you're doing all the research on Musashi and there's no imagination involved, you still have an imagination. So now we have a historical framework. Here is where our fiction and our imagination comes into play. History tells us what happened. They rarely tell it like it really was. So this is where we get to fill in the gaps and invent the conversations and the private struggles and the emotional journeys that are not recorded with history. this is our job as a fiction writer. This is what we get to do. This is where our fun begins. We get to imagine the moments and transform the facts of history into the story that we want to tell. Really, when you start and think about it, the best historical fiction sits at the intersection of research and imagination. All right, you have to balance both. The research gives the credibility, the imagination creates the narrative experience. So we have to select the historical details we want to use that serve the emotional arc of our characters, instead, and use that within our narrative without overwhelming the reader with an information dump. We've all heard about information dumps. We all know how well those go across with readers. There is a time and place for information dumps. And done right, they enhance the story. So when you're at that intersection of imagination and research, this is where your historical fiction starts to feel more personal so your readers can relate to it. Your readers are always going to connect with your character first. Then you want to build your story around your character. And then you want to use sensory details to immerse the readers in the setting. Again, here's where research comes into play, because by this point, you've already researched what your city sounds like, or what your boat, your ship sounds like, what your western town sounds like. You know what it smells like. You know what textures of the clothing are, the feel of the leather on a saddle, the feel of the plating on the armor, and you know what the atmosphere of the time period is. So once you have all of that, then here is where you start to highlight your love, your loss, your ambition, your survival, and the themes that always resonate across the centuries. Historical fiction really does succeed when it does more than just recreate the past. It allows the readers to experience it emotionally. And when research, imagination, and emotional truth come together in your book, the history becomes alive. And that is where our readers feel the connection. That is the story that they will carry with them long after they close the book. This is the reason why readers like to read and reread books. I mean, James Clavell's Shogun is still sitting up in the top 20, because of this, because of the research and how he wove history into fiction. We don't want to recreate the past perfectly. We want to restore the past's humanity. The research gives us the architecture, the imagination fills the room, and the emotional truth lights the lanterns in the window. And when the lanterns are lit, the past is no longer distant. It is alive. So for all of my historical fiction readers out there, the next time you sit down to write a historical novel, don't ask yourself, did this really happen? Instead, be the storyteller that you are and ask yourself, does my story feel real enough that someone, somewhere, is going to remember it? Because if you can answer yes, then you know you've met that intersection of research, imagination, and emotional truth in your book. Ta-da! That's what I've got.
That's awesome, Beth. I really enjoyed that, and I think that it resonates with me because, like I said, I just happened to get into writing a book that's set in the past too, and every time you do that, I'll tell you what, there are people out there who know a hell of a lot more about the Old West than I do. A hell of a lot more. So my advice to people is to do your best to get your facts straight, and then have some people read it that might catch, some inaccuracies, or if you've, did you call it presentism?
Presentism, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really a good thing. It's very easy to assume that things are a certain way, and it's very easy to miss something. Particularly the more exotic or the further back the historical story
Right.
is.
Right.
If the historical story is in the 70s, I got a pretty good idea what's going on, back in the 70s. That's not too far for me. But, if we went back to World War II, that's going to be, a little bit more difficult. And if you put it in Europe, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. And, I mean,
but go back,
kind of
go back to something like Heian period Japan, which was 1400s. There's very little that we know outside of Japan about that period.
How do you feel about sensitivity readers or something of that ilk for period pieces?
If the period piece is dealing with something that is touchy, for example, a big elephant always in the room is, the American slavery period,
yes.
of story. It's, if you are dealing with something like that and you are unsure how your reader's going to take it, by all means, use a sensitivity reader. Ask a sensitivity reader to go through it and give them your opinions. I had a young lady that I edited for who was writing a book in the Civil War, and the character's mother was a nurse, and the character's father was a member of, I believe it was the Union side. But when I read her manuscript, she shied away from touching on the things that she needed to really touch on to make the book feel like a historical fiction. So
it's in that time.
Yeah, she didn't touch on. I told her, I said, look, you're working. I said, let's not sugarcoat this. This was a rough period in American history. If you're going to write about the Civil War, write about the Civil War. If the mother is a nurse in the hospital, what did it smell like? What did the men look like? What were the screams like? If they were amputated, if they had amputations. I said, don't shy away from that. I said, you're writing historical fiction. Write historical fiction. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't whitewash it. Write it for what it is, because this is the truth of the matter. You can do all the research and learn what it was like, learn what the conditions were like, and then use your imagination to write it into your book. And when she came back to me with the second draft after taking my advice, the book was 100 times better.
It came alive, didn't it?
It came alive. It came alive.
Yeah. Took you to that place. That's the thing that's, you got to touch on, you got to go for it. You got to go for it on these things.
Yeah.
Because that's where the flavor is.
That's where the flavor is. But, if you're writing something that you're unsure of as far as sensitivity goes, by all means, use the sensitivity reader. If you're writing historical fiction and you feel it feels flat, have a beta reader read it, and or go to an editor, or just pick up the phone and or jump online and reach out to Dirk and I and say, hey, I'm stuck. Can you help us? Can you help me? Can you look at this? What am I missing? Because we're more than happy to help you. I mean, that's what we do.
Sure.
But you want to bring the authenticity into your story, but you also want to use your imagination, and you have to find that happy medium. And if you're stuck, or if you're not sure how something is going to go over with your audience, have somebody else read it.
Yeah. All right. I know that you wanted to mention an event that's coming up here soon. Yes. So let me turn it over to you for that.
Okay. So real quick, I will be at the Books in Santa Fe, New Mexico on, I want to say it's May 30th. Hold on. I got to look at the calendar again. I got too many dates in my head. Yes. May 30th, I will be in Santa Fe at the Books in Santa Fe. So there's going to be a whole bunch of authors. There's about, I think, 40 to 50 of us that are going to be here. Wow. Tickets are now on sale. And you can get your tickets at eventbrite.com and just look up Books in Santa Fe tickets and come out and see me. Come out and see all of us. We want to see our fans. We want to meet our readers. And we would love to sit down and chat with you and find out what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to see more of. So come on down. If you're looking for a reason to go to Santa Fe just to see the area, here you go. Go for a book signing, pick up some books from your new favorite author, and check out the sites. I know that's what I'm going to do once I'm done with book signing, is actually go and see a little bit of Santa Fe.
Cool. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, that's good. I think I've done enough talking for today.
All right, I hear you. I hear you. Well, you did good. I really enjoyed that presentation. I'd like to see a lot more stuff like that. Hopefully we can do more of that here. All right. I want to say that Beth A. Freely is offering editing and book trailer services, and I'm offering author social media management, designing book covers, and laying out books at themusesfunhouse.com. I'd like to invite everyone to join and participate on our Book Crew Facebook group. It's facebook.com/group/Book Crew Podcast. Join and tell your author friends. Finally, visit our site, bookcrewpodcast.com, for the information about this episode and all our previous, well, not all of our previous episodes.
Well, most of our previous episodes.
I'm getting there. Thanks once again for the presentation from Beth A. Freely. I'm Dirk Hooper saying, dream hard.